This video is in response to people who make the accusation that any talk of restoring patriarchy is unmanly and that men should just man up and just find the good women. Let's get started by changing the subject briefly. In France, from about 2006 to about 2017, they had really terrible labor laws. And their labor laws are getting better, but very recently. Now, it's fine to be pro-labor, but any laws you pass to the benefit of labor come at the expense of the business owner. So in France, they had these laws saying that if you had 50 or more employees, you basically couldn't fire anyone, unless for very specific causes. And people were taking advantage of these laws by not showing up to work, not doing their job. And French businesses responded by not hiring people once they reached 50 employees. They would just stop hiring people. And that was bad because unemployment was very high. Now, the French decided to respond to this. They couldn't necessarily just repeal the labor protections because then people would riot. So the French tried to compromise. They created a law in 2006 where people under the age of 26 were exempt from the labor protections. So people under the age of 26 could be fired to allow companies to hire people, but people over the age of 26, basically voters who they were trying to appease, they would still have these protections. The goal was to lower unemployment and get people back to work and to avoid riots. Well, riots happened anyway because the young people saw that they were being screwed. That, older people were getting these protections and they couldn't be fired, but they could be, and that was bullshit. So after riots every single year in France for about 10 years, Macron finally reformed the laws, got rid of a lot of the pro-labor bullshit, and now unemployment is finally going down, the economy is starting to revive, and so on and so forth. This is a textbook example of the balance between labor and business owners being too heavily tilted towards labor. And when you disrupt this balance, there are consequences. In the case of France, you had a decade of high unemployment, you had annual riots, and any attempt to rectify the situation, turned out very badly. In the case of France, these pro-labor laws went way beyond the pale. They just completely destroyed the balance between labor and business owners. This created a circumstance with high unemployment, but then because France is a very pro-labor culture, any attempt to rectify the situation to lower unemployment caused rioting. So eventually, after 10 plus years of pain and annual riots, eventually people felt enough pain, they pulled their head out of their ass, and they finally started taking away these pro-labor rights to restore the balance between labor and business, to allow unemployment to finally go down, to allow people to be fired. It's still slow going, but they're making progress. That's just the story of economics. People, they do something that feels good, that sounds like it's the right thing to do. There are consequences. They feel enough pain. They eventually realize this law, although well-intentioned, was a bad idea. They try to move in the opposite way. People riot, people protest, and it's a back and forth. And it takes decades, sometimes generations, for things to finally shake their way out and for a balance to be struck. Now let's talk about feminism. Feminism is just this 100-year-long epic of women constantly getting more and more rights at the expense of men. Men lose their authority, women gain more autonomy and freedom. The problem is, just like the pro-labor laws, they have consequences. When you screw over business owners in favor of labor, you get high unemployment. When you screw over men in favor of women, you get low fertility, low marriage rates, and demographic replacement. This is because the balance between men and women, just like the balance between labor and business owners, has been destroyed by the government. Now the question then becomes, what do you do? So when it comes to labor, it would be foolish to try to shame business owners into hiring more people. Like if you have 50 employees and if you hire 51 employees, these really anti-business laws will kick in and all your employees will stop coming to work because now they get these protections they didn't get yesterday. And that will happen. And some dipshit walks into your business and tells you, you need to do the manly thing. You need to man up and hire people because people are hurting. There are people out there who need jobs and unemployment is high. You just need to hire them. You tell them to go fuck themselves. You'd be completely justified in doing so. However, right now, because of feminism, under the same kind of situation, women's rights have come at the expense of men's rights. Men have no authority over their marriage, over their family. Women have all the authority. They decide, for example, whether a child lives or dies. The father has absolutely no input. It's not even the father's baby until the mother wants money, and then it's the father's baby. It's completely ridiculous. The laws are so tilted towards women. Just like in France, the laws were too tilted towards labor. You can apply the same thing with children. There's a lot of movement to take parental rights away from families, and so to enshrine children as equal to adults. It's ridiculous. If you take a parental authority away in the name of equality, how are parents supposed to raise their kids? How are they supposed to maintain any kind of authority over their children? Now, if you did that, parents would be in a no-win situation, and they'd effectively have to stop having families, and they would abandon their children. That's what the actual real-world consequence would be if you disrupt the balance between parents and child, just like high unemployment and riots are the result of disrupting the balance between labor and business owners. And low fertility and low marriage and demographic replacement are the consequence of disrupting the balance between men and women. Now, what I'm really sick of seeing is these trad cucks talking about how you need to man up. You need to stop hating women, stop blaming women. Just man up and find a woman and marry her and make white babies. Go fuck yourself. Don't go to business owners and tell them you just need to find the good workers. Just need to find the good workers who will actually show up to work, even though all the laws give them every incentive to not show up to work and force you to pay them anyway, because these pro-labor laws are out of control. You need to find the really good workers. Maybe there are good workers out there. However, you cannot tell the difference between one and the other. And by the time you go all in and hire them, then it's too late. You find out to your detriment, oh, they were lying. They were faking it. They just wanted to get in so they could stop showing up to work and take your money. And you have no protections, no recourse if it turns out they were just lying. And of course, it's your fault. Oh, you hired the wrong employee. You should have hired the good employee. You see how stupid this sounds? So business owners in France were doing the rational thing by not hiring people. This caused high unemployment. It wasn't the business owner's fault. They were simply looking out for their own interests. The laws were too heavily skewed towards labor. And the only remedy isn't to shame the business owners to hiring people anyway because people are suffering and we need employment. The actual remedy was to repeal the horrible laws that favored labor too much. If you want marriage and children and fertility, and you want to avoid demographic replacement, you have to repeal the laws which favor women over men. Now, when you repeal laws that give women additional rights, you're taking those rights away. Just like if you repeal laws that favor labor at the expense of business owners, you're taking workers' rights away. There are two things that mean the same thing. Call it whatever you want. The only way to restore families and fertility and marriage and demographic growth is to take women's rights away, or, if you prefer, repeal the laws which give women rights at the expense of men's authority. You have to restore patriarchy. Call it traditional family values, call it the role of the father, call it whatever the hell you want. You have to repeal the laws which favor women at the expense of men and cause low fertility, low marriage rates, and demographic replacement. Shaming men to man up and find where the good women are hiding makes as much sense as shaming business owners to tell them to find the good workers in an environment that the labor laws are at their expense. The only correct response is to repeal the law. And just like with France, it might take decades, it might take generations. When enough pain is felt, when enough riots happen, when enough blood is in the streets, then you realize, wait a minute, we need to increase marriage rates, and we need to increase fertility, and we need to lower welfare dependence, and all these things that are caused by empowering women. One day, someday, maybe you'll feel enough pain. And just like the people of France, after a decade of high unemployment and annual riots, they finally realize, wait a minute, these pro-labor laws have gone too far and we need to make some changes. And the changes are very subtle, very gradual. Things are only going down slightly. If that's what you want, fine. When you felt enough pain and you're ready to take some of these women's rights away, come talk to me. If you want to solve the problem, you know what you have to do. It's just a matter of, are you emotionally and, I guess, morally prepared to do the thing you have to do? Eventually, you'll be driven to it once you felt enough pain. So you can hold on to your morals as long as you want. You can shame men as long as you want. The marriage rates will continue to fall. Fertility rates will continue to fall. Demographic replacement will continue to rise. The pain will be felt. You have to fix the law. You have to take workers' rights away in the case of a high unemployment, pro-labor regime like France, and you have to take women's rights away in the case of a gynocentric feminist society like exists in the United States and most of the West. That is your only option. Nothing else works. I've looked into it. Nothing else works. So when you felt enough pain, you'll eventually come to the same realization. So let me know when you felt enough pain. As far as your shaming and telling men to man up, fuck you. You're part of the problem. So when you felt enough pain, I want you to realize that from now until that moment, all the pain you're feeling is of your own doing. You are causing this pain yourself by refusing to admit what the actual problem is and doing anything to rectify the situation. This is all your fault. You are the unmanly one. You are the coward. You are the one who isn't doing the right thing because you refuse to address the actual problem. Because you want to have your stupid principles and you want to believe in the sacred cow of equality. Anyway, that's it. Hope you learned something. This is Turd Flinging Monkey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.